Don, thank you very much for kicking us off today, and welcome to all of our virtual attendees. Mark Wilson here, and on behalf of the Florida Chamber Foundation, we appreciate you joining us for our annual Economic Outlook and Jobs Solutions Summit, and for being all in on our mission to secure Florida's future. Before we dive into the program, let me first say to you that Florida's economic outlook remains strong, and I'd like to start with a few acknowledgments. A special thanks to the entire team at FPL, who happens to be one of our foundation's community development partners. We appreciate your investment as the presenting sponsor of this year's summit. I'd also like to once again acknowledge Don Keselowski, who serves as the chair of our Florida Chamber Foundation. We appreciate Don for leading our foundation's efforts to unite the business community as we continue researching ways to put the long term ahead of the short term. Let me also thank our gold sponsor, Walmart. Without the investment and commitment of the sponsors you see on the screen, our program simply would not be possible. So thank you all. Next, let me thank our growing group of community development partners, Florida's job creators and futurists with a statewide footprint committed to championing solutions for Florida's long-term economic success. It takes significant resources to manage our research tools, such as the Florida Scorecard, the various reports that we release, which we will be referencing throughout today's program. And to have a team of expert economists at our foundation, it matters. When you see these companies around Florida, please be sure to thank them for their leadership and their investment in the important work that we do. Last, but certainly not least, I'd like to thank our Florida Chamber Foundation Board of Trustees for putting on today's program and for informing our efforts to secure Florida's future. Now, let's dive into the program. So as we get started, one thing's clear, and I want to let it be known at the outset. Everything about Florida is changing. Our demographics are changing, our economics are changing, our politics are changing. And rest assured, our research team has taken all of that into account as we formally make our 2025 projections for you today. Speaking of projections, right, it all starts with a plan. It's very important to know that Florida has a strategy. It's called the Florida 2030 Blueprint. And businesses all over Florida are working on taking Florida from where we are now, which is if we were a country, we would be the 16th largest economy on the planet. And our goal by 2030, if we do the right things, the 39 goals that are in the Florida 2030 Blueprint, we can be the 10th largest economy on the planet, which today would be Canada. And so we've got a goal and we're very focused on it. We have about 23 million people who live in Florida right now. We're going to add about 2.8 million more by 2030. And it's a big opportunity for everyone tuning in today. We need to be very focused on job creation and the right kind of jobs. We have just over 10 million people in Florida who work, and we're going to add another 1.45 million new jobs on top of that by 2030. So let's keep that in focus today as well. In terms of visitors and traffic, these things go together. We have over 140 million people visiting our state right now. These are record numbers, and we predict we're going to add another 40 million on top of that on an annual basis by 2030. You put all of those numbers together, and we're going to have about 2.5 million more drivers on our roads by 2030. And so what we need to do is we need to focus on putting the long term ahead of the short term. And so as everyone knows, we have 6 pillars in Florida. These were researched by the Florida Chamber Foundation. And for everything from education to quality of life, it all works together. Infrastructure, competitiveness, innovation, economic development, it all works together, and it organizes the advocacy, it organizes the research. We have hundreds of nonprofits and business groups that work with us at the Florida Chamber Foundation. And the pillars allow all of us to align our strengths to become that 10th largest economy in the world. As I often say, we just need to grow smarter over the next 2.8 million people than we did over the last 2.8 million people. We're all in this together, and we need to make sure we don't make the same mistakes that states like California, New York, and Illinois have made. And that's the big Florida opportunity. In terms of what people are talking about right now, in a big way, companies are calling me talking about 4 big things that they want to make sure the Florida Chamber Foundation and all of our partners are focused on. Just real quickly, 4 key calls that I'm getting on a regular basis. Workforce. We have in Florida more jobs open than people looking for work. Affordability. The cost of home ownership in Florida is obviously a key concern. A lot has been done in Florida over the last couple of years on this, and so we would expect this to be getting better in the years ahead, but nevertheless, it's a top 4 concern. Third issue that ties to affordability, our lawsuit abuse crisis, our insurance challenges in Florida. Again, big reforms have been made in the last couple of years, thanks to our partners on the Florida Chamber of Commerce side. And these things are making a big difference. We're actually seeing insurance rates decrease in the filing side. We're also seeing insurance policies stay stable for the first time in a long time. So these reforms work. We still have more billboards in Florida encouraging you to sue someone than any country on the planet, but nevertheless, a lot of work is being done to mitigate that. And then, of course, infrastructure. I mentioned traffic, water, communications, roads, seaports, spaceports, rail. All of this works together like a hand in glove. You can't have economic development and economic diversification if we don't have the right infrastructure. And so all 4 of these are calls that we're getting. All 4 of these are issues the Florida Chamber Foundation and the team at the Florida Chamber are leading for Florida. I often say if Florida was a stock, we'd be investing as much as we could, and it's because these groups are working together to get ahead of these kinds of challenges. In terms of tools that you all have, the Florida Chamber Foundation is known nationally as a trendsetter in coming up with tools that business leaders, elected leaders, and the general public and voters can use. So on the left side of your screen there, you see one that people are talking about across the country. It's called the FloridaScorecard.org. We have thousands of metrics at the state level, but you also can click on your own county. We have 67 counties in Florida, and you can check. Your county commission can do this, your school board can do this, your board of directors can do this. You can literally load up your local metrics where they're updated constantly, not just once a month. And on the right side there, the Florida Gap Map. This is used by a lot of national organizations. These are the zip code level metrics. And so in Florida, we have 983 zip codes in Florida, and we have over 100 metrics that we measure at the zip code level. When you put both of these tools together, more and more companies are directing their philanthropic dollars and their volunteer time into the zip codes and into the policy areas where they can make the biggest difference. It's all about ROI and it's all about philanthropic alignment. The way we're going to cut childhood poverty in half, the way we're going to be the first state in the country to have 100% of our third graders reading at grade level is by using these tools and the business community focusing its resources on the right outcomes. Speaking of resources, right, the state of Florida has a pretty significant budget, right? About $119 billion is the current budget that we have. Keep in mind, Florida has more people than New York, but New York's state budget is about twice the Florida state budget. So it's no wonder people are leaving states like New York to come to places like Florida. Remember, we have the lowest debt per capita of any state in the United States. I think we're the only state in the country where it's less than $1,000 per capita. We create about 1 out of every 14 new jobs in the United States. And one thing people are noticing is when we lower taxes in Florida, it actually generates more revenue. More companies are here. We're #1 in the country for new business startups. And people are moving. People move here, they bring their wealth. And so all of that contributes to a growing economy, to a growing GDP. Speaking of GDP, when we look at industries that are on the growth path, on the left side of the screen there, you can see that transportation and warehousing, fastest growing industry in Florida. Arts, entertainment, recreation, again, second fastest. But when you look at Florida on the national scale, we have the second highest growth in GDP. We have the 4th highest GDP. But if you look at where California is, the largest GDP in the country, they rank number 34 in their growth. And so a lot of these industries are picking places like Florida as a place to plant and grow their seeds and grow their jobs. And Florida is the big benefactor of that. Obviously, our country is at a crossroads right now. There's a lot going on in geopolitics. There's a lot of discussion about reshoring jobs. And inside of our country, there's a lot of people moving from one place to another. and this trend continues. We're going to continue to see net in-migration in Florida be strong. Businesses are moving from high state, high tax, high crime states into Florida, and we're going to be the big winner in that. And so not only are the companies relocating to Florida, their employees are relocating to Florida. And this slide talks about the wealth migration, the in-migration that's moving into Florida from a lot of states like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California, Pennsylvania. As a matter of fact, Florida is #1 in the country when it comes to net migration of dollars of income, if you will, coming into Florida. In fact, a lot of people ask about Texas. Florida has 3.5 times the income migration coming into Florida as Texas does. As a matter of fact, you have to add states 2 through 10 just to equal the amount of income that's moving into Florida on a regular basis. If you look at California, New York, Illinois, they are literally losing millions and millions of dollars an hour of income, whereas Florida is gaining over $4 million an hour of income moving into Florida. So trends with people are going to come and go, but in terms of wealth migration, Florida continues to be the #1 winner in the country, and we're predicting that that's going to happen again in 2025. In terms of population growth, again, I said at the outset that Florida is going to add about 2.8 million more people by 2030. This is going to happen in every county. All 67 counties we think are going to see more people in them in 2030. But if you look where the growth is, it's not even across the state. About half the growth is going to come in just 5 counties, and over 80% of the growth we predict is going to come in 10 counties. And so again, very important for your company, for your industry to see where this growth is predicted to be. And as we look at people moving from one state to another, more people are moving to Florida than any other state in the country. And that's a trend that we've seen for a while, and it's important to recognize. Now, there's a lot of other things that we're paying attention to. And so when we look at people on a net basis moving in and out of Florida, we've had 14 states last time we reported this on a net basis that we were losing people to. Now that number's up to 19. And so again, even though more people are moving to Florida than any other state in the country, we're now the second highest state in the country for net migration in the nation at 126,000 people. When we look at a very important age bracket, 20 to 29, we do see an uptick in the amount of people who are leaving Florida in that age bracket. And the top 2 reasons that they give us are the cost of home ownership and job opportunities in other states. That's an interesting one because remember, we have more open jobs in Florida than people looking for work. So we need to really double down on our future of work workforce issues and make sure that we're doing the right training for the right future jobs in Florida. That's going to be a big focus of our Future of Work initiative. Speaking of future of work, what we have in Florida right now, again, as I've said, we have more open jobs than people looking for work. And so we have this mismatch. We have all these great jobs in Florida. What we really need to double down on, we have the #1 rated college and university system in the United States, whether it's a ICUP school, whether it's a public school, whether it's a college, whether it's a university, whether it's a technical school. We need to make sure that the business community is showing up and making sure that we're giving the right input so that we have the right training for the right future jobs. And remember I mentioned before 2.8 million more people were going to be moving to Florida by 2030, and I said about half of that growth is in just 5 counties. Well, if you look at these 5 counties on screen, 46% of the open jobs in Florida today are in just these 5 counties. And again, everything's changing in Florida, like I said at the beginning. So it's important to know where the growth is, where the migration's coming in, where the open jobs are going to be. Speaking of open jobs, as I mentioned before, if Florida was a stock, we'd be investing as much in it as we possibly could. One brand new tool that we've released just a month or 2 ago is an outlook all the way out to 2032. We've taken all of the workforce regions in Florida, and we've taken the top 30 in-demand careers all the way out to 2032. And we now list them on our website, so you can go to every region in Florida and you can find out what the in-demand careers are going to be. But more important than that, you can find out what the projected wages would be and what the pathway to get to that career path would be in each region. It's a big game changer, and we're looking forward to you sharing it with your management team as well. In terms of what voters think in Florida, remember I said everything's changing, our economics, our demographics, and our politics. And I want to end by just giving a little perspective. For the most part, voters in Florida think that Florida is headed in the right direction. But when we ask Florida voters if our country's headed in the right or wrong direction, on our last poll, fewer than a third of Florida voters were confident that our country was heading in the right direction, and over 2/3 think it's headed in the wrong direction. Now, I've chaired our National Association of State Chambers, and I can tell you when I talk to my peers that run state chambers across the country, there's a sentiment in the United States today that, hey, Florida's got a great education system. You're creating 1 out of every 14 jobs in the country. You're #1 for in-migration. You're focused on new business startups. You're focused on venture capital and research and development. How can we be more like Florida? And so the rallying cry for us here in Florida is how can we make sure we continue to do the right things to keep Florida moving in the right direction? Final thing in terms of a data point that I wanted to share is because I talked about politics changing so much, this is an important slide to keep in mind. So from statehood all the way to the fall of 2021, Florida had more registered Democrats than Republicans. But in the last 3+ years, that has changed, and it's changed significantly. And so there's now over 1.1 million more registered Republicans in Florida than Democrats. And in a typical month in Florida, you can see the last voter file update we had, which was from December at the time of this program today, is that about half of all of the new registrations every month are Republican. The next choice is no party at all, neither Republican or Democrat. And the third registration is Democrat. So this is happening in over 60 counties in Florida month after month. And so we don't see this trend stopping anytime soon. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. So again, I want to thank all of you. I especially want to thank the Florida Chamber Foundation's Board of Trustees for putting the long term ahead of the short term. You're going to hear from 20 experts today, and we're going to cover a lot of ground today. Florida is a state worth fighting for, and this place we call Florida can provide a national example of how we grow an economy. And one more person I'd like to thank, Florida's Secretary of Commerce, Alex Kelly, has been an absolute champion as we try to align all of our local economic development professionals with local chambers of commerce, the entire Select Florida Board of Directors. Florida's moving in the right direction, and our partnership with Secretary Kelly and the Commerce Department is a big reason why. And I want to thank you for your participation in the Florida Chamber Foundation.
Thank you, Mark.